bring up who is the most famous contemporary Irishman that we all heard of, or
Muhammad Ali.
no?
He
I
is
said
Irish.
Irishman.
Yeah, I'm saying that's
Oh,
probably the most.
no, not somebody that identify with black. I'm talking about a Caucasian white man, most
Oh,
famous.
you're talking about the president.
JFK, yes. And the reason why I'm bringing it up, you said Muhammad Ali. The reason why I brought it up is Trump is going to release the unredacted JFK files tomorrow. It says President Donald Trump has announced the release of approximately 80,000 unredacted pages. Damn, 80,000
They're out there already.
of
See what
documents.
happened?
Wait, let me just read this. President Trump has announced to release 80,000 unredacted pages of documents related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. These documents, set to be made public on March 18, 2025, will be released in full transparency following his campaign promise. Tulsi Gabbard, as the Director of National Intelligence, coordinated the team responsible for this release.
Actually, they've been out there since 1991. Congress passed an act in 1991 that authorized the forwarding of all documents, investigative reports, etc., anything, correspondence that had to do with any recorded assassination or assassination attempt. It was in a repository located on 14th Street in downtown DC. I've been there. All right. You could make a request, a formal request for specific documents or specific categories of documents. President George Herbert Walker Bush, a Republican, issued an executive order to back this up, and then he lost. And in 1992, Bill Clinton followed it up as president and issued another executive order. So up until somewhere around 2004 or so, or 5, you could make these requests. And then they removed this repository to Bethesda, Maryland, where it's not so wide open now. But the thing that I think Trump is doing is he's going to publish it rather than just make the stuff available as an archive for those who make specific requests. For some reason, well, not for some reason, but interestingly enough, there was very little attention paid to those documents when they were freely available. And I've seen a bunch of them, and a lot of them were in the James Earl Ray file, in that case I had in my courtroom in the mid-90s, late mid-90s. So it's interesting what's in there. I've seen a lot of it, and I did become the guest of some detectives in Dallas who were involved in the original Kennedy investigation. Most all of them were retired, but they felt the investigation was not complete. So it's interesting what they let me see that they got from this repository on 14th Street, downtown DC. Now, some of it you marvel at with the FBI's involvement in the stuff, because what broke all of the mess down is everything from the Warren Commission to the situation with further investigation on it. They relied on the FBI. And when you get the FBI internal memoranda, they would say, send this to senior agent so-and-so so that what we supply will comply with the, quote, they put it this way, the director's wishes. And that was always J. Edgar Hoover. And that sick puppy knew about a lot of things. I know he knew about the planned assassination of King. And by the way, James Earl Ray is not the person that killed King. It was a two-man team, most likely recruited from the Marine Sniper School in Quantico, Virginia, which is just across the tarmac on the same base with one of the FBI training academies. I know they supplied the murder weapon, and I've seen the invoice for 5 of them that they received in late December of '67. I saw the 5,000 rounds of the special ammunition that they got on that same invoice, which matches precisely what they pulled out of King's body. And then, late April 1968, the same month King got assassinated, the Justice Department ordered the FBI to return the 5 rifles to the Defense Department, and the FBI, after conducting an inventory, claimed they lost one. Well, I know the serial numbers for the 4 they returned and the 5 they got, and the missing one is the one that was used to shoot King. The unique ballistics match exactly what they pulled out of King's body, and it was a special experimental sniper rifle that the U.S. had made 62 copies of in 63 barrels.
So going back to JFK.
JFK, all of that was in there, and I got invited by the Dallas police detectives who had been involved in the initial investigation, including those who were standing next to Lee Harvey Oswald when Jack Ruby shot him in the parking lot. So it was interesting, their conclusions, that which do not match the official version, and they had very bad feelings about the FBI. And when you look at the records that are there, if you have context, you can put stuff together. If you don't know what you're talking about, you don't have any clue about ballistics or anything like that, there's not much for you to get out of it. But if you know the secrets of ballistics or the arcania, you say, whoa, wait a minute, something wrong with this one right here. And then when they start naming names, and particularly if anybody's researching, I will call your attention specifically. Write this down. I'll say it slowly. Look at the correspondence between the lawyers for convicted gangster Billy Saul Estes and U.S. Attorney, Assistant U.S. Attorney Stephen Trott. Billy Saul Estes, Stephen Trott. And you will find that some very interesting things were supplied to Stephen Trott, including what turned out to be the name of a person whose fingerprints are found on the buttstock of that Carcano rifle that Oswald is supposed to have used to shoot King. I mean, not King, to shoot Kennedy. Oswald's prints are not on that rifle, but this person's are. Mm-hmm. And there was a deal cut between Trott and the lawyers for Saul Estes where he said, if this checks out, I will see to it that he gets clemency. In other words, his sentence would be commuted to the time he'd already served for what he was in there for. They refer this to the FBI. You get a chance to read the FBI memoranda where they said, quash this, and they send back a false report that there's nothing to it. Trott looks at the report and writes a long letter to the lawyers for Saul Estes and says the FBI has checked it out, there's nothing to it, so we don't have a deal. But actually, when the Dallas police detectives got it in the 1990s, late 1990s, it was a big deal, and it answered a whole lot of questions that are not addressed by anything out there. Nothing. And when you look at the questions that are raised, you say, oh, like, for example, the grassy knoll is not where a shot came from. It's almost impossible. They decided to do what the FBI declined to do. They actually ran the limo in question through and had a crowd line up on the way. You can't shoot anybody from the grassy knoll because if anybody's standing on curbside watching the parade, you can't see Kennedy's head, because it would be hitting people chest high who are sitting on the curb. So you'd have to count on sitting up on the grassy knoll and count on nobody standing between you and where you'd have to take the shot. So it's interesting stuff like that, but you find that nothing came of it because the FBI interfered and deliberately came back with false reports that there was nothing to it.
Let me ask you this question. Where were you when JFK Jr. was assassinated?
Well, let's see. I was in high school, I think 12th grade. So,
do you remember the day?
Yeah, I remember the day, but I don't remember what I was doing. It was no big deal to me.
They didn't. Did they send you guys home from school
They
or?
didn't send us home from school. We came back to school the next day and the day after. Nobody stayed home. I
Oh,
think they had at noon. We had a little thing where we had Gene Pace and some musicians who became industry quality magician. I mean, not magicians, musicians later on. I think they had a moment of silence for their noon
mhm.
concert that we'd have every noon to keep the violence down. So
Well, this is the thing. So he's going to release it tomorrow, but is he's 80,000? No one's not going to read 80,000, let
yes,
alone
you
100.
can. Yes,
No,
you
you
can.
can't. But I think the majority of American people, they just want the one page that says who did it.
Well, it's not going to tell you who did it because nobody knows who did it. They're just some suspects that were developed in what I saw that were never followed up on, and you never heard their names. And there were some things that are some peculiar bits of evidence, like the medical examiner that examined Kennedy's body and came back with the reports. He also was the biggest funeral home operator in Texas. He got arrested some years after the Kennedy assassination because guess what? He was allegedly a hitman for the Texas oil mob. And what wound up happening is he shot this guy 7 or 8 times and set the house on fire where he thought the body was. The guy escaped, identified the medical examiner for Texas. He got arrested. The medical examiner who did the autopsy on Kennedy was being transported to the Dallas County Courthouse and supposedly tried to escape and got shot 14 times, allegedly. The detectives, based on what they got out of this archives, got an exhumation order, which they had executed a few months before they invited me there. When they went in to dig the coffin up, they found the coffin. It was in a funeral, a cemetery operated, actually owned by the medical examiner. Remember, he's the biggest funeral director in Texas. And when they opened the coffin, there was no body in it. Now, the interesting thing is the fingerprints they found on the buttstock of the Carcano, they were able to identify once they had a known suspect. And this person had been the primary suspect for somewhere around 34 hits in Texas, is the main suspect. And he had been first in his high school class, went to Yale. When World War II started, he signed up for the military. He got decorated. He came out in 1947 in front of 34 witnesses. He shot somebody in the head 5 times, was convicted of murder and sentenced to die by hanging. Well, he had been in 6 weeks. His appeal was pending, and the governor commuted his death sentence to manslaughter, time served. So he got out after he had done 6 months on this murder, and he was a suspect in more than 30 other murders. Well, this medical examiner certifies that this guy dies in a one-car wreck, broad daylight, on a highway in Texas with no witnesses. So when they exhumed his coffin, there was no body in the coffin. So it looks like somebody did a real souped up witness protection thing on the medical examiner who was under indictment for being a hitman and attempting to murder somebody. That's the person that did the autopsy on Kennedy. And another person he did an autopsy on, allegedly, whose fingerprint showed up on the rifle in question, was in fact somebody who did not get buried in his grave, neither one of them. So you have stuff like that, but you have to know the clues. So I'm giving some people a line. Look for lawyers from Billy Saul Estes sending letters to Stephen Trott, who was a U.S. attorney. And Stephen Trott makes an agreement with them and then look at the FBI report, which is totally bogus because you also can retrieve the FBI internal memoranda to see what was really going on. Stephen Trott, by the way, became a pretty decent federal district court judge, and I met Stephen Trott way back when in Los Angeles as a result of Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, the Black Panthers who got murdered by the US organization. He was the prosecutor on that. Wow. So anyway, I knew him.
Well, thank you for breaking that down. And we're going to talk about that on the X Space tomorrow. If you're around to do an X Space tomorrow night, so dive.
Yeah, I'll reiterate it. But yeah. Stephen Trott, Billy Saul Estes.
Okay.